Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted that you could leave your TVs and the hockey game to join us this evening. The last I heard is it's 4-0 for Boston. So, anyway, welcome to the HST Public Forum here in Victoria. My name is Catherine Lauren. I am the president here at Camosun College, and I'm very pleased to be moderating this evening's activities. Before we proceed with the forum, I would like to welcome everyone to our campus and just to tell you a very little bit about Camosun College in case you're not familiar with us. We serve over 13,000 students on 2 different campuses, and they are registered in an array of innovative degree, diploma, and certificate programs, and we have an additional 7,000 students who are registered in continuing education courses. Each year, Camosun welcomes over 800 Aboriginal students from 50 nations and more than 700 international students. Camosun College has earned an outstanding reputation for teaching excellence, and in fact, we're very proud of our faculty, staff, and students, and the fact that we provide one of Canada's best learning experiences. We're also very proud to host this forum, which is part of the series of 11 public sessions being held in 10 BC communities prior to the HST referendum. We are here this evening as a result of the Public Dialogue Fund that was created by the Government of BC. This fund is independently administered by BC's universities, colleges, and institutes. 3 associations representing British Columbia's post-secondary institutions are responsible for organizing the forums, and they are BC Colleges, BC Association of Institutes and Universities, and the Research Universities Council of BC. Our goal here this evening, and at all the HST public forums, is to hold informative, respectful, and I will come back to that word, respectful, public dialogues before British Columbians vote in the referendum. This forum is organized in an impartial way. I'm here this evening to facilitate the discussion, to ensure that the speakers have the chance to present their views equally, and that audience members have the opportunity to participate in the dialogue and ask questions. We do have some rules of engagement for this evening and for the proceedings. We ask that you keep your questions short so that we can get to as many people as possible. The focus is on questions, not on statements or grandstanding. If there happen to be any disruptions during the discussions, we will ask you twice to be respectful. If the situation continues, we will ask you to leave. What will not be tolerated are disruptions, heckling of any kind, interruptions, or anything that would disrupt the activities. We do realize that this is a very emotionally charged issue and that we have some very passionate views on both sides, but the goal for this evening is to proceed in a respectful manner, to listen to the information. This is an information session to help you vote in an informed way on HST. Representatives from 2 groups that have been successful in their request for public funding to advance their views about the referendum will be speaking at this forum. The 2 official sides are the Fight HST Society, the yes side supporting a referendum vote to return to the PST-GST. The Smart Tax Alliance, the no side, supporting a referendum vote to retain the HST. We are here this evening to provide a platform for discussion and to encourage dialogue so that British Columbians can make an informed decision in the HST referendum. Camosun College is not taking sides. I am here this evening to moderate the proceedings in a nonpartisan way. At this time, I would like to introduce the people who will be speaking this evening. To my right, we have Kevin Milligan, Associate Professor of Economics at UBC, and Cindy Choi, Certified General Accountant from Chan & Company, representing the Smart Tax Alliance. Please welcome them. To my left, we have Bill Vanderzam and Bill Thielman, representing Fight HST. So would you please welcome the 2 Bills. So, just for your information, each side is going to make an up to 10-minute opening presentation. Following the initial presentations, each side will provide a 5-minute rebuttal, and then we will proceed to questions from the audience here and online. I invite you to address your question to one of our presenters. The other side will also have a chance for a short rebuttal to each of the questions. And the key there is short responses. You can write your question on the sheets of paper. I believe we have some paper cards that have been distributed. Hopefully, yes, you have them. We will collect those throughout the evening and read out some of your questions. If there are some duplicates or whatever, Lisette will cull the duplicates, and so if we're not asking your question specifically, we've either A, run out of time, or it was duplicated with another question. We will also have some questions that were submitted online. Now, before we get started, I would like to remind everyone that this forum can be seen on the internet at www.hstpublicforums.ca. So that everyone can hear the discussion, we ask you to set your phones to vibrate, but do keep those devices going. We encourage you to tweet your views and impressions of what you hear tonight. For this forum, use the Twitter hashtag #HSTVictoria. For your information, the washrooms are located at the end of the hall to the left as you leave the auditorium. In case of an emergency, there are 7 exits, 2 located at either end of the building, and 2 on the same side, and 3 on the opposite side of the building as of this auditorium. So, let's get started. The order of tonight's presentations was done by the flip of a coin at the first forum that was held in Dawson Creek last week. The sides have been taking turns in the order of the presentations. Each side will make their presentation. There will be a rebuttal from each side, and then there will be questions. So Kevin Milligan and Cindy Choi from the Smart Tax Alliance side are first up, followed by Bill Vanderzam and Bill Thielman. So I would ask Kevin and Cindy to please begin.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction. Thank you for the welcome. And thank you all for coming out on Hockey Night. In just a few weeks, British Columbians will have a unique opportunity to be finance minister for a day. They will choose, you will choose, the sales tax system we will live with for the coming decades. The old PSD sales tax system was created back in 1948. Now, that was so long ago, that was the year the Maple Leafs actually won the Stanley Cup. The PSD was an old tax held together with legislative duct tape. It was definitely time to join the rest of the world and move on to a modern, efficient, value-added tax like the HST. I'm here today to explain why we should move forward with the HST. But let me begin by telling you what brought me here. I'm an economics professor at UBC. I'm a volunteer here. I'm not being paid a cent. I'm not a politician. I don't have a political agenda. I don't represent the government, and no one has told me what I must say. I'm here as myself. I'm Kevin Milligan. I'm an economist. Normally at this time of year, I'm finishing up the grading of exams. I'm talking to some graduate students, I'm writing some research papers. I was motivated to step out of my office and come here today for a couple of reasons. The first is that I'm really, at heart, an evidence guy. I've spent the last 15 years studying and teaching how to evaluate public policy and evidence on public policy. And that's what I've done every day for the last 15 years. With that experience, the evidence I see in favor of value-added taxes like the HST is simply overwhelming. 140 countries in the world use a tax like the HST and have retired their old-fashioned taxes like the PST. The professional consensus on this, among those people who spend their day thinking about taxes, is really overwhelming. Second motivation for me to be here comes out of my personal experience. I come from a family that earned its money in the construction trades. My dad ran a small business. He installed garage doors. I can recall many nights I'm doing my homework and I saw my mom and my dad at the kitchen table working through all of these government forms they had to fill in. Their frustration was mounted as they dealt with the complexity of dealing with systems like the old PST, with all of their absurd complexities. I saw the stress that causes personally. Making life easier for small businesses by easing this burden of dealing with 2 tax systems is very important to me. So that's why I'm here. But I understand that a lot of you care passionately about the politics of the HST. Look, no one likes the way this tax was introduced. The anger caused by those political decisions is really legitimate, and I'm not here to tell you that you shouldn't feel that way. But what I'd like to suggest is that you might consider directing the anger at the right place. On the ballot that we are about to receive in the mail, assuming the strike doesn't interrupt that, we're going to be choosing a tax structure. We're going to be choosing either the HST or a two-tax 12% PST-GST system. That's it. There are no political parties on the ballot, no politicians' names. What's on the ballot is HST versus PST. Now, some of the pundits tell us there will be an election this fall. An election is a great time to vote against politicians who have disappointed you. That's your chance to take your pound of flesh. If your goal is to hurt politicians who have disappointed you, that's your best chance. But right now, we're choosing a tax system that will be with us for the next generation. Choosing to go back to the old, complicated PST will simply hurt the economy. It's not going to hurt any politicians. It will hurt us. Why throw out the baby with the bathwater?
Good evening, everyone. I'm a CGA and I'm a professional accountant, and I work with small businesses and individuals here in Victoria. CGAs are trusted advisors, and we see more than numbers. We see the big picture. We see the economic benefits for small businesses and how this tax policy that provides benefits to businesses can be passed down to the community that they live in and work in. So how can I stand here and defend the HST? It's because it's the right thing to do. It's to provide facts and information. It's to provide an understanding for seniors and for the poor and for what the new 10% rate means to all families across BC. And one of the biggest myths about the HST is that it will hurt families, seniors, and low-income people the most, but it's a powerful myth, and it's not true. It's an argument that goes that families and seniors and low-income people, they have the least money. And the HST is a new tax, so they think they'll pay more, and therefore they have to spend more for less. And the big picture is something completely different. First, there are exemptions to the HST as well as to the provincial portion. So for example, your basic groceries, your residential rent, your prescription drugs, most health and dental services and educational services are tax exempt, 0%. Then there are home heating, gasoline, books, child-sized clothing and shoes and car seats and booster seats and diapers, and these have no provincial tax. They're only subject to the federal portion, which equals to 5%. So when you look at your household budget of, for example, a low-income households, most items that they spend on are on tax-exempt goods or goods based tax on 5%. So you add the new 10% HST into the mix, and people will say because the products that they used to be subject to 12% PST-GST will now be taxed less. But that is only part of the big picture. When it comes to families and seniors and low-income people, there are tax cuts and there's HST credits that were brought in at the same time, and we really need to put that into equation. So there's about 1.1 million British Columbians that are receiving these HST rebate checks. This is extra checks that they're paying, so the tax that they're paying is erased by these credits. So that means you have a few extra $100 in your pocketbook. But for low-income seniors, they're also protected another way. They have the HST credit, they have the OH security, they have the guaranteed income supplement. These are items that help low-income seniors. So when you add the 10% HST that puts families and individuals ahead, going back to the PST-GST system will cost them an average of $120 more. So just for example, if you're an individual or a family that's only earning $20,000 a year, you're going to be ahead by $130. If you're at $40,000, you're ahead at $159. If you're $100,000, your family's ahead by $61 under the new 10% HST. So this new HST will raise the challenges and costs for all but the richest British Columbian families. So there's more money in your pocket, more money to spend in your local stores. And for those individual reasons is why I support saying no to the PST and GST system. Now moving away from individuals and tax credits and families, I'd like to talk a little about HST and businesses. I work every day with small business owners. And people argue that HST is bad for small businesses. It's simply not true. It doesn't drive away business. Businesses are becoming more competitive. It doesn't force all companies to go underground. It's not cumbersome, as some people say. It's just simply wrong. What I find is that HST is a good tax policy. compared to PST. PST was considered hidden tax, while HST is considered value-added tax, and we'll go more into that during this conversation. But the main thing I want to point out is that when I talk to small business owners, one of the things that they're concerned about is that they don't like paperwork. Who does? And so we're going from a system of pairing 2 sets of tax filings and audits every month and going to one simplified, more efficient system. Businesses are not sending PST forms to the Ministry of Finance or sending a GST form to CRA. They are sending one form, one HST form to CRA. One form to file and one agency to administer and audit it. So HST is good for businesses.
Yeah. To close up, just to talk a bit about the economics of the HST, I just want to emphasize one main point. There's been lots of debate about the size of the economic gain that the HST brings us. What's really clear is that removing the tax penalty of the PST improves investment. More investment means better job creation and better paying jobs. Now, some say this impact is really large, others say it's not as large. But what's important is that no credible analyst talks about the direction. It's always positive, whether it's a big positive or only a medium-sized positive, it's all positive. That's what's important here. Going back to the PST will not create one single job. Sticking with the HST just makes the most sense for our economy. To sum up, imagine a future with companies freed from this PST tax penalty, creating better and better paying jobs. This is good for young people just starting out. Imagine how good this is for new Canadians bringing their entrepreneurial spirit to start a new business or to support their families. If we go back to the PST, this future is lost to us. We'll be stuck paying back $1.6 billion to the federal government, rehiring an army of tax collectors, and wasting 2 years of our time restoring an antiquated, job-killing tax system. We really need to say no to that future. We can do so much better than that. What I encourage you to do is have a look at the facts, and I hope you come to the same conclusions that I have, and that's that we need to say no to the PST. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll turn to the other side now, Bill, and ask you to proceed with your comments, please.
This is the 9th meeting, and we've had similar meetings throughout the province, and everywhere we go, we're told about these theories and these assumptions and these premises. And let me just quote one premise that perhaps explains it all. The so-called independent panel calculated that the cost to the average family would be $350 extra per year under the HST. But they arrived at the $350 on the assumption that 90% of what you pay in HST would come back to you by way of lower prices. So the real number per family is more like something in excess of $1,200 per year on average. But they say it'll only be $350 per year because you're going to get all this money back in lower prices. Now, I know government has a basket by which they measure inflation. It's got a big hole in it because they leave out the big cost items, including, one comes to mind, gasoline. But our government says, well, we have a solution for that. We have the HST. We're going to take $2.8 billion out of your pockets, you the consumer. We'll take that out of your pockets, we'll redistribute this, give it back to business, and then prices will come down and you'll all be happy. When this all started 2 years ago, we didn't get a government willing to provide a process which we're involved with now. We had to fight for it. We had volunteers throughout the province standing on street corners in sleet, snow, wind, rain, cold, collecting signatures. They collected 705,000 signatures. There were polls done, and the polls indicated 85% of the people were opposed to the HST. But the government said, no, we'll go ahead. We're going ahead. As a matter of fact, the Premier at the time said, we don't care how many people signed a petition. We're going ahead anyway. Well, obviously, there was a bit of a problem because we won the initiative petition, which forced the government to have an initiative vote. And at some point in the process, the government decided instead of an initiative vote, they would have a referendum. And then I met with the Premier, and the Premier said, we're going to provide you with a level playing field. We're going to provide the one side, the pro-HST side, with $250,000, and you, the anti-HST side, with $250,000 as well. And you can travel the province, and you can do your advertising, radio, TV, newspapers, or whatever. That's your money. But they didn't tell us that they would change the rules by way of an order in council. And the rules were changed so that anyone could spend whatever amount of money they wished and basically say whatever they wished, because there was no way to scrutinize it, to provide scrutiny, as we saw during the initiative petition from Elections BC. So we have $250,000, and we've managed it very well, and we're very fortunate because we have so many people on side. We have so many volunteers, so many people that are working for us throughout the whole of the province, doing whatever they can to tell people about the HST and why we should extinguish the HST. The other side, the business side, they have millions of dollars. As a matter of fact, you've seen those glitzy ads during the hockey games. I don't know what the cost of that, but it's got to be enormous. They've got millions of dollars to spend. Now, they're telling you that they're spending all this money because it's good for you. Frankly, I doubt if there's anyone believes that big business would throw millions of dollars at something for your good. I think it's quite the contrary. But they're spending millions of dollars. Then the government comes along, and they spend $5 million on stickman ads. My neighbor suggested they're trying to stick it to us. But they're spending all that money on stickman ads. And they have spent another $2 million on other functions, including what we're seeing today. And by the time they're finished, it'll probably be more like $10 million. We'll know at the end of the year when we get it through some audit or whatever the process available to us. So we do have a bit of a battle, obviously, fighting all this money. But we know what's happening in the real world. You've lived with the HST for a whole year now. And right where I live, in Ladner, I see businesses closing. Out of business is the headline in the paper. Stores are closing in Tawasin and Ladner. And I'm sure the same thing is happening in many small communities throughout the province, and probably soon, if not already, in the bigger cities. Now, I know big business stands to benefit by this, so obviously they're promoting it. They think it's great. Small business, however, for the most part, particularly those that are tourist-oriented or restaurants, or those that are selling items that are discretionary, are suffering because they'll lose business. You can't take all that extra money out of the pockets of the consumer and not have it affect small business particularly. And it's not the businesses that create the jobs. It's not the businesses that create the jobs. It's the consumer that creates the jobs. If you don't spend the money, if you don't make the marketplace hop, then obviously all that'll happen is a whole lot of widgets are put into a warehouse and they're not sold. It's you, the consumer, that makes it happen. We also know that the boomingest city in North America today is very close to where I live, called Bellingham. And there's lineups of people going across to Bellingham to shop, and we've just come back from a trip along the Alberta border. And if you're in business in Dawson Creek or Fort St. John or Cranbrook, Fernie, Firewood, any of those places, you're suffering. Because a lot of people, especially when they're buying a big ticket item, go to Alberta. And Alberta's doing very well. Incidentally, we hear a lot about HST being great globally. Well, we can look at Europe and see what's happening. And they didn't have a process like this where they could vote on it. They were forced into the VAT, and not recently. It started in the early 50s. And they're not doing well by it. You know what's happening in Europe. And in our own country, the maritime provinces aren't an example of economic activity and job creation either. They've got the highest unemployment rates in the country. They've got the greatest per capita debt. And the provinces that are really doing well, doing better than any other province, are the provinces without the HST. It's Manitoba, it's Saskatchewan, it's Alberta, where the unemployment rates have dropped and where there's lots of economic activity and where the per capita debt is lower than elsewhere in the country. So when they hold forth all those other places, you have to ask yourself, how are those other places doing, and how does Europe get out of it now that they're into it? Greece, we're told 80% of the people don't pay taxes because it's all black market. Everything's done for cash. And if they do it for cash, they don't collect the HST, but not only do they not collect the HST, they don't collect income tax either, because the moment somebody reports it as income, they're caught not having paid the HST. So it happened in Greece, it happened in Spain, it happened in Portugal, Ireland, Iceland, all of those countries. In Europe, it started out, the HST, the VAT started out at 7% in the 50s, 6 and 7%. Now it's an average of 21%. And in some European countries like Denmark and Sweden and Hungary, it's 25%. It's so high, the politicians have hidden it in the price of goods. And in Britain, they were losing so much money to the black market, $30 billion, that they in fact decided they had to do something about it, because the black market was growing much faster than the real market. So they upped it from 14% to 17%, thinking that would be a cure, and of course that only made it worse. They were losing $30 billion a year in the black market, they estimated. So we have a problem with the HST, black market, people shopping elsewhere, people cutting back on their shopping, particularly on discretionary items, and that hurts the economy. But the government says we're going to make jobs. Initially, they reported that over 10 years they would create an additional 130,000 jobs. Then the so-called independent panel came back and said, no, it's not really 130,000 jobs. It's 24,400 jobs over 10 years. Well, we've already lost that many jobs in the last year. But they said 24,400 jobs, not 130,000 jobs. And the government picked up on that number and said, we're going to create between 24,000 and 100,000 jobs. Talk about misinformation, talk about misleading. We're going to create between 24,000 and 100,000 jobs.
Time is up. Please wrap up your thought.
Similarly, the group opposite, the business group, they're putting out this information as though the tax were already 10%. It's a promise for 3 years from now.
Time is up. We'll now turn to the other side. You have up to 5 minutes for a rebuttal.
Thanks. Thanks for that. I'm going to speak to a couple of things. I'll hand it over to Cindy to talk from her experience. First, Mr. Van der Zem mentioned prices in the CPI. So I actually have the numbers in front of me. Since June 2010, before HST was introduced, in all of Canada, CPI inflation, including gasoline, including everything, this is the all items CPI, is up 3.1%. In BC, it's only up 2.56%. So some things have gone up in price, other things have gone down in price. This big increases of prices that Mr. Van der Zem is talking about are simply not in the data. I'm an economist, I look at the data, so that's where I start. So let me also bring in an anecdote. Maybe people don't like looking at the data. Here's an anecdote. There's a guy named Bob Dino who runs a small business in Kamloops. It's called New Tech Fire and Safety. He had suffered under the PST GST system, all the complexities of dealing with that you have to as a small business. It was a big headache. With the HST, his headaches were washed away. He was able to hire 2 new staff members, and he also lowered his prices on many of his services. This is a real example. His name is Bob Dino, New Tech Fire and Safety in Kamloops. You can look it up if you think you'd like to. A couple of other things. Mr. Van der Zem mentioned big ticket item shopping in Alberta or in Bellingham. Let me remind you that you paid PST and GST of 12% on big ticket items before, whether it's buying a new washing machine or something like that. You're paying 12% and perhaps in the future 10% now. So actually there's been no change in that. There's always been this shifting of purchases across borders. That hasn't changed a bit because of the HST. Finally, and then I'll pass it over to Cindy, you know, all this stuff about Europe that keeps on being brought up, Greece and Belgium and Denmark. We're in BC, okay? And what we know is we've seen the federal GST go from 7% down to 5%. Gone down. Second point about that, I'm really curious which problem that we're seeing in Greece and Belgium and Denmark, which of those problems would be solved if they were to adopt a BC-style, old-fashioned provincial sales tax. That's what we're up to here. We're not about getting rid of a tax and replacing it with nothing. We're about getting the HST guys want to take the HST and replace it with this old PST system. That's not going to solve any of the problems in Europe, and it won't solve any problems in BC.
Thank you, Kevin. I would like to provide a local example right here in Victoria. And there's a couple named Bill and Denise Downs. They run a family-owned small business called Downs Construction in Victoria. They've been in business in Victoria for over 30 years. They calculate their savings from the HST and gave raises to their 38 employees. Bill and Denise are saving that 7% on those input tax credits, and they're reinvesting in their business and in their staff. The second point I want to make is an earlier comment on the underground economy. It existed when the GST was introduced, and working as a professional accountant with CRA auditors, I can say CRA has an effective auditing system to find unreported income, and people eventually get caught. But if you're a legitimate business providing high quality work, customers are going to come to you for your service. And I have a personal example. I had a leaky roof. The leak was coming right into my baby's bedroom. And I went looking for a legitimate business to replace my roof because I wanted the protection of the warranties and the guarantees from that work. And I'm not going to risk and avoid paying tax. It won't help you if I have a leaky roof. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the other side now. Bill, for your rebuttal.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm scared to look at my phone to find out the score, so we'll just get right on with it. It's a pleasure to be here, and I have to say it's a pleasure to work with Bill Vander Zalm. I spent about 2 years trying to get rid of him when he was in power, and now I'm working with him every night this week, and I visit him in his house in Lillian, and I'll tell you, if there's any indication how bad the HST is, it's that we're working together on this one. But I'm glad that Kevin's here. It's nice to have an economist here, and it reminds me, of course, what Harry Truman said, that he was always looking for a one-armed economist because he was tired of hearing on the one hand, on the other hand. And Kevin would have a job with Harry Truman because he's certainly got one side on this. Listen, there is no 10% HST. There is no 11% HST. This is what the folks of the Smart Tax Alliance. There's only a 12% HST. And then there's some political promises that might get you to 10% in 3 years if you believe politicians promising these things. And it doesn't matter whether you're left-wing or right-wing. Darrell Dexter, the Nova Scotia Premier, Nova Scotia NDP, the first time they were elected, said there'll be no tax increases under an NDP government. And as soon as he got in, he said, oh, the books are worse than we thought. We'll have to raise the HST by 2%, make it to 13%. Or 15%, from 13 to 15%. So don't believe people promising things, whoever they are, 3 years down the road, it's pie in the sky. Now, Cindy, I think, said that it was a myth that this HST would hurt the poor. And I was just thinking about it. Former Premier Campbell, former Finance Minister Hanson got together back in 2009, and they said, in a secret meeting, how can we help the poor some more? We haven't done enough for the poor. Should we raise the minimum wage after 8 years? No, that's not good enough. We got to go better. Should we try and end child poverty, the worst child poverty record in any province for 7 straight years, according to all the statistics? No. Should we increase social assistance or disability benefits? No. I know. Let's bring in a new $2 billion tax. That'll help the poor. I mean, this is unbelievable stuff when we hear this. The unemployment rates, we heard about that. Kevin said not a single job created by the PST. Well, let's look at the unemployment rates across Canada. I just happen to have BC stats here going up to April. BC's unemployment rate, 7.9 with the HST, higher than it was a year ago. 6.1% in Alberta with no HST, 5.6% unemployment in Saskatchewan with no HST, 5.4% unemployment in Manitoba with no HST. A left-wing government in Manitoba, a right-wing government in Saskatchewan, right-wing government in Alberta, the common element, no HST. So I think that there's some job problems there. Bill's already pointed out, they said they were going to create 130,000 jobs, now it's 24,000 jobs in 10 years. We have 2.25 million people working in British Columbia. It's an infinitesimal fraction. How you can predict it 10 years from now, I do not know. But I will tell you about other things about jobs. A&W Restaurants reported the first time in 30 quarters a 3% decline in same-store sales. 30 quarters this hasn't happened. It happened after the HST. That's jobs being lost, that's money being lost, it's business going down the drain. No underground economy. Cindy says the CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, catches these people. If you have a $10,000 renovation job, you're now going to pay a 12% tax. You could save yourself $1,200 by not doing it through the ordinary channels, by doing it under the table. Do you think anyone's doing it? I had a media person interviewing me recently who confessed that they'd already done it. I mean, if people like that are doing it, you don't think there's a 30-40% loss of income for the government and for proper businesses and people who play fair? HST is good. How many people go shopping in Nova Scotia? Let's go save some money by go shopping in Nova Scotia. Of course they don't. They go to Bellingham. They go to Seattle. Question for the Smart Tax Alliance. I ask this regularly, they don't answer. How much are you spending on the TV ads during the Stanley Cup? How much are you spending on the robocalls to your home? I'm sure a lot of people got robocalls, auto calls. How many paid staff? They won't tell you. They don't want to say. Our budget is $250,000. They got the same $250,000 from the government, but they're raising millions from large businesses, and they don't want to tell you what the budget is. Some of their members went to court to try and stop us. They actually went to the BC Supreme Court, laid a legal action to try and stop the initiative, the Citizens Initiative signed by 705,643 people that was validated. They wanted it to be thrown out. That's the commitment to democracy from the Smart Tax Alliance membership.
Time's up. Please wrap up your thought.
So my advice to you, don't take advice from Stickman. Vote yes to extinguish the HST and save your money.
Well, thank you to both of our sides. We're now at the point where we will take some questions, and I see Lisette collecting. I think we're collecting some questions, and we also will do a combination. I will read out some of those questions, and I believe, Lisette, do we have microphones for people who would like to ask their question directly? And we have someone to help with the microphone. So in the first instance, perhaps we'll take a couple questions from the audience if you'd like to hand over the microphone. I would just, again, some rules of engagement here, ladies and gentlemen. We will ask you to keep your questions very brief. Please avoid statements or rhetoric or grandstanding. Simple, straight question, and I will ask our respondents, please, to do likewise. Straight answers as much as you possibly can. Keep your responses to under a minute, please. So, if you'd like to speak with the microphone, raise your hand, and we'll bring the mic over to you. Yes, sir.
Hello, everyone. My name's Bill Downs. I own a small business in Victoria, currently employing 58 people. When the HST came into effect, it enabled us to give our employees raises. We spent $169,000 at local businesses on new equipment.
Question, please. Could you get to the question?
The question's coming. How is this bad for small business?
And to whom are you directing your question?
To Mr. Vanderzam.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Well, I'm glad to hear that your business is doing well. I'm a small business person too, and all my clients are having to pay an extra 7%. I'm not able to do anything. I'm not expanding my business. It actually hurts my business, and we've talked about A&W. There are winners and losers in the HST. There's no question about that. And it's good that you have some advantages for you, but other people aren't there. But the real disadvantage is for consumers, because consumers are having to pay extra for all the things that we've been talking about. Domestic airline tickets, train tickets, taxis, dry cleaning, all those things. Realtors' fees, appraiser fees. So it's fine for your business, but I personally don't want to subsidize your business with my money.
Thank you.
I should also point out that...
excuse me, sorry, very briefly then, Bill, if you wouldn't mind, we have a response.
I should also point out that the real estate business, and certainly those in the home renovating business, are suffering, and I get messages every day from them.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to the other side.
So I could point out that the Chambers of Commerce of BC, thousands of small businesses are supporting the no side to keep the HST. Just to point that out. But, you know, we could argue back and forth about, you know, who's right on the small business thing. But I'm a professor. Am I allowed to assign a little homework? What I'd like to do is to ask everyone just to talk to small business people in your life. Pick 5 of them. Ask them how the HST has changed their business. And see what you get. And I invite you to base your vote on what you hear.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay, I'd like to address some of the opening statements that were made by the no side.
Yeah, we need you to ask a question.
Sure. The HST was introduced in Saskatchewan, and they went back to the PST. The Economist would suggest that no jobs were created after that point from going back to the PST. I don't think that's true. My question is referring to the other statement that they made about the Downs Construction, the local business. They said that the money that was saved from the HST had gone into paying the increased salaries for the 38 employees. At the same time, we have the Economist telling us that the Consumer Price Index says the prices are going down. So my question is, where is this money coming from? If the money is going to increasing employee salaries and the prices are supposed to come down, where is the difference here?
Please.
Thanks for the question. You know, when we're thinking about what happens when you introduce a tax like this, what happens is the tax rate on new investment goes down. That creates an environment where firms are able to invest more in new plant, new equipment, new things that are going to make for a better environment for their employees, better jobs, more jobs. Think about prices going down. I mean, the evidence is in the data, it's in the anecdotes. You can believe it or not. It's up to you to decide. But think about jobs and think about some businesses, like Mr. Downs' business. He decided to give his employees a raise. Other businesses decide that for their industry, it's best to pass price savings on to consumers. In other businesses, they decide, let's improve customer service. It really depends on what kind of industry you're in and what you're facing. For me, better customer service, higher wages for your employees, more jobs, you know, these are all three kinds of good. I don't care which flavor you like.
Thank you. And our other side?
So the other side, the pro-HST side, is trying to have it both ways. They keep telling us that prices will come down. As a matter of fact, the report they go by time and again, and all the figures they quoted earlier, are based upon prices going down so much that whatever you pay in HST will be offset by 90% through price reduction. Now, if they want to make that argument, and they do time and again, and they did again today, then the business that's giving 90% back of it to you only has 10% left. And if they have 10% left and they pay income tax on that, there's really only 7%. Now, 7% of the total amount that they collected or got back in HST is very little, negligible, won't make a difference. They're not going to hire people or expand business based on that little left. So the bigger businesses, of course, those that export, I'm talking about particularly people that ship these raw logs out of Kitimat, barge after barge going to China, or the truckloads going across to the U.S. to be cut into boards and 2x4s. Those businesses get their tax back, as does the cable company, which when your computer breaks down, you phone them, you get somebody answering in Nova Scotia or Prince Edward Island. But they get their tax back here from you, the consumer. Or General Electric, the biggest company building all these run-of-the-river projects and selling the power to BC Hydro for more than BC Hydro can sell it for. They're also getting their tax back. And you don't get any benefit from that. If the mining company mining for copper ships the material overseas, the tax they get from you won't make any difference. And if it did reduce the price of copper, it wouldn't help you a bit.
Okay, thank you. I'll read some of the questions now that we have collected. This question is for Kevin. When does the 2% reduction in HST take place, and how is it legally guaranteed?
Great. It's a really good question. And it seems to me that involves a lot of political decisions. What we have here is the finance minister and the premier have promised to lower the taxes. In fact, I've led a resolution to the House, and it's gone on to Ottawa, and lots of political legal details that I don't want to get into, because what I'm really focused on is what's on the ballot in front of us, which is the HST versus the PST, GST 12% two-tax system. When I think about these, I know people are really concerned about the credibility of these political promises. And you know what? I'm an economist. I'm really skeptical about anything I hear from politicians as well, whether it's the ones in Victoria or the ones who are leading Fight HST. All the politicians. I'm a little skeptical about their claims. So when I think about the future, what I know is one thing, and that is that we're choosing here a tax system. It's going to be the GST, PST system, or the HST. What happens with 12%, 11%, 10%, that's going to matter an awful lot more than what happens in the provincial election that's coming up. What we're choosing now is the structure. The rates that happen are going to be chosen by the politicians we elect in the future.
Thank you. Any response?
Well, I agree with Kevin that most people or all people are skeptical about political promises. And we've seen many political promises in the last several years. No HST, we got HST. Revenue neutral, it wasn't revenue neutral. Lots of jobs, the jobs didn't happen. Prices will go down, it didn't happen. So I think most people have lost faith in any of those promises. The government has lost its credibility. So if they can't be trusted for a promise made to take effect a week or two from now, how can they expect us to trust them for 3 years from now? They may not be the government. There could be, heaven forbid, some disastrous things happen, and the Premier will go on television and say, well, you know, maybe another time, not now. We need the money. So don't believe the 10%, and they shouldn't be using it on all their brochures. It's misleading. As a matter of fact, if you in your business did this, you'd probably end up in jail and a big fine.
Thank you. Our next question is directed to, I believe, both Bill Thielman and Cindy Choi. Question is, where can I find a definitive list of items taxed under the HST so that I can compare it to the PST GST list? Cindy, would you like to respond?
That's fine. That's a great question. If you go to the website, a couple options. The main one is the hstinbc.ca. They give a list of the goods that were taxed at 0% prior to the HST, and then what it would not change at 0% now. So, for example, things that did not change would include residential rent, mortgage payments, basic groceries, child care expenses, such as daycare, prescription drugs, public transit, and the existing housing. Other items like the unchanged, that was 12% GST, PST, and now 12% HST. You also have a list as well. It includes almost all household goods, such as buying a car, furniture, TV, VCR. Actually, that's non-existent. iPhone, and we have those things that haven't changed. And then the list goes on. There's things that have instant rebates. That's also on the website. So, for example, when you go and fill up your gas tank and you buy gas, you get an instant 5% rebate. For me, when I go and buy some clothing for my daughter, I get an instant 5% rebate. I only pay 5%. I'm not paying the full 12%. When I have to buy a car seat for her, I'm paying 5%, not 12%. So these are just examples that I have for you, but there is a list available for you online. So please look at it and do your research. Thank you.
Bill Timmon, would you like to respond?
Thank you. I got to take a deep breath. Here's the start of the list. There's an extra 7% with the HST on restaurant meals, basic cable, telephone, home repairs and renovations, domestic airline tickets, movie and sports tickets, haircuts, gym memberships, realtor fees, new homes over $525,000, vitamins, home inspections and appraisals, non-prescription drugs, health foods, some groceries, massage therapy, taxi fares, parking, accountants, financial services, veterinarian, newspapers, magazines, and much, much more. If you go to fighthst.com, our website, you'll find the Fight HST hit list. The government was upset about it. They wouldn't put out their own list, but we put one out, and then they complained about it. It was misinformation. So we said, we'll correct it. Tell us what the list is, but they didn't want to do that. Even today, there is a partial list. I will tell you the good news. There are two things the government notes the price has gone down on: diapers and luxury cars over $55,000.
Yeah. Thank you. Move on to our next question. This is for Kevin. How does raising the HST create jobs?
Raising the HST. So we're switching from a PST, GST, two-tax, 12% system, to a system that right now will be HST, a unified tax, 12%, and in the future may go down to 10%. So there's no increase going on there in the overall rate structure. How does it create jobs? Well, we've heard this before. The problem with the PST, GST two-tax system is that taxes get embedded. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. My dad, the garage door contractor, he buys a truck. He had to pay PST on that under the PST system. When he bought that from the dealership, they put up a big sign saying, Bob Clute Pontiac. And you know what? He had to pay PST when he put up that sign. When GM in Oshawa made that truck for him, they had to pay PST on their electricity. All that PST adds up and it cascades, ends up when my dad goes out there and is trying to price his business, he has to include all this PST in the prices that he paid he charges for his businesses. Now, when the PST is gone, all of that gets wiped away, gets to claim it back, and all this charge is HST on the final purchase. That means that he's able to invest in a new truck, need a new body to drive that new truck. That's how you create jobs.
Thank you. And response on the bills?
Again, I think when these big corporations buy fancy equipment at a big price and they get the HST back, they're not really buying the equipment to create jobs. They're looking to buy equipment to save jobs. That's what happens more often than not. And keep in mind, we're a resource province. We export most of what we have in our province to either the US, Asia, or Europe. And presently, the PST, for what they pay PST for, they don't pay PST on equipment. They never did pay PST on equipment for manufacturing. They pay perhaps on the computer, the office stuff, and the likes of that. But the PST was charged to the customer in China or the customer in the US or the customer in Europe. Now you, the consumer, are picking up the PST that was previously paid in these other countries. You're picking it up right here in Victoria. You're paying the HST, and it's going back. And I'm sure that a lot of these companies are very thankful and very grateful to you because it helps the shareholders, and the CEO will certainly want to report to the board that he got an extra profit and therefore deserves a pay increase.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. And I think this would be directed to the HST side. Is it true that if we revert to GST-PST, that the switch can't happen until 2015? I read that on the contract between the federal and provincial governments. Is this true?
We're trying to discuss, we'll share the answer. For the transition to happen back from HST to a PST and GST system, we're looking at having to hire back 300 PST tax collectors. That's going to cost our province $35 million annually. So there's no savings in that. It will take time. I'm not sure in regards to that reference, but I do know in the HST independent panel report that there are estimates between 18 to 24 months to put the correct systems in place. You need the right systems, the checks, the balances, the controls to have a proper administered PST system if you want to go back to an antiquated system. I believe Kevin want to follow up?
Yep, done. Okay. Other side?
Sorry. Yes,
Response?
thank you. There is an agreement, of course, and it is a 5-year agreement. We now have a federal tax system. We gave up our provincial autonomy, something that people like Carol Taylor, the former finance minister for the BC Liberals, and Rick Thorpe, the former revenue minister, said they would never want to do, never give up the autonomy and all the exemptions which BC decided, exemptions like bicycles and for things we thought here in BC are important. But there is an agreement. However, I will say this. Prime Minister Harper was specifically asked during the last election campaign. I don't think there is anybody in any political party in the federal level that would say to British Columbia, after a successful referendum, to vote to extinguish with a yes, to extinguish the HST, sorry, wait till 2015. There will be a deal, it will be negotiated, and the HST will be extinguished. The federal government is not going to stand in the way of a binding referendum of this province.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question, and this is directed to the Fight HST side. How is it that the HST is bad for small business and the economy when it has allowed us to give employees raises, save $12,000 when purchasing $16,900 worth of equipment from local businesses, and it benefited from our purchases? If we are also employing 10 more people than this time last year. So why is the HST bad for small business under these circumstances?
Well, I don't know what all the circumstances. Obviously, we're being given one example and one reason, that's the HST. But that's great. I'm very happy to see that an employer, a business, is giving his employees or her employees an increase in their pay. Obviously, people will need an increase in pay in order to pay the HST. That may be inflationary in itself, But I think the employer that does so is to be commended, to be congratulated. I think you either lower the prices or you give your employees more money. You don't keep it for yourself and pocket the stuff.
Thank you. Response.
I'm glad to hear that it seems to be unanimity now that the HST is good for small businesses. That seems like a new thing. We're making some progress here on night number 10. But really, it's really important to think about how important the small business sector is for our economies. Specifically, 50% of the exports from BC are from small businesses. These small businesses, before, when they're exporting stuff, there's a cherry rancher, or a cherry orchardist, who in the interior, and she exports cherries around the world. When she bought a truck, when she bought equipment, she paid PST on that before. So she's trying to compete with all the other cherry growers in the world to get these contracts from global cherry buyers. Now with the HST system, what happens? She gets to claim back all of the HST she pays when she buys a truck and buys equipment. This allows her to be competitive and allows her to expand her orchard, hire more employees, pay them better wages, and compete out there in world markets. That's what's good for small business, and that's what's good for our economy.
Thank you. I believe we have a question from the audience.
Okay. The question is for Mr. Van der Zam. Mr. Van der Zam used to be our premier, and I've actually voted for you. But I happen to support the HST. But I'm just wondering, if it's rescinded, how do you propose to make up for the $1.6 billion that the feds have promised? Because you know a little bit about balancing budgets, I'm sure.
You're talking about the bribe money. You know what? They've collected, I believe, $1 billion, so they still have $600 million to collect. And maybe with the mood in the province today, they will tell the federal government to keep the money. You must also understand that my accountant did a little calculation and said the federal government is collecting an additional $300 million per year in income taxes from the province of BC. Because what used to be a tax-deductible item for business is now a taxable item. So they've already collected $300 million, and I guess by the time this is all done, who knows what it is they'll collect. All of that needs to be taken into consideration when the province negotiates. I hope they do a good job. They might take a lesson from Quebec as to how it is they negotiate. But that's what's needed. Now, the province obviously has a big deficit. They've created debt for things that they probably should not have created debt for, but that's it. It's there. But you know what? You turn on your radio tomorrow morning, chances are you're going to hear the radio say, know your limit, spend within it. I think the province, the people that, from the province that put these ads on the radio might take a lesson from their own message and practice it too.
Thank you. And a response?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I really think it's important to think about the consequences of going back. Not only is there the $1.6 billion we have to pay back, but as Cindy was mentioning before, there's this whole new army of tax collectors we have to rehire and retrain. Right now, Ottawa is paying for all of that administration. It costs about $35 million a year. We have to start paying for that again here. I don't think that's a good thing to go for the future, paying back $1.6 billion, hiring new tax collectors, and what's worst is putting back this system, this complicated system for all the small business people in BC to fill in these complicated rules that are conflicting with each other across these two systems and having to fill in all of these tax returns all the time. I think going back to all of that mess is something that we really have to think about carefully.
We're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. So we have a gentleman in the back there.
My name is Brad Slade, and if you'll forgive me, Madam Moderator, I'd like to hand in my homework. I am a Fight HST volunteer. I spoke today to 35 to 40 businesses. 3 of them said it's a good thing. The rest of them told me things ranging from I've had to lay people off, to I'm closing one of my franchises, to businesses down 30%.
And your question, sir?
And my question, thank you for allowing me to hand in my homework. I didn't know it wasn't leaked. I didn't know you were going to ask. I have a question for each of you individually. As businessmen, and Kevin, I'm sorry I missed introductions. I'm not sure if you're just the professor or if you also run a business, but can you each give examples of where the HST has helped your business to lower costs for consumers or to hire more people, please?
let me just say thank you for handing your homework. I'm waiting for a little apple on my table. And I'll pass it over to Cindy. I am a professor. I don't have any clients. Cindy has many clients and she'd be happy to share some of those stories with you.
Thank you for that question. I did share a story earlier today about Bill and Denise Downs, who run a family-owned business here in Victoria for over 30 years. And when they did their tax calculations, they passed down that 7% savings to increase wages to 38 of their employees. And that's just one wonderful example. Okay, but please remember that in BC, there are over 98% is made up of small businesses. We support small businesses every day. I support small businesses by giving them tax advice. And from that salary, I go out and I support other small businesses. I buy basic groceries, I buy diapers, I buy clothing. I'm supporting the economy. And it's a domino effect. We work as a community. We make money, we spend money, we help the economy. Depending on your household budget, you will see what you spend more on. And personally for myself, I spend more on a mortgage and insurance papers and basic groceries and diapers and children-related things. And so the tax effects to me is different. But speaking on businesses, I have given a clear example.
Thank you. A response on the other side.
Thanks. My business as a consultant, my clients are now charged an extra 7%. I'm a service industry communications consultant, so they're all charged an extra 7%. I don't work 7% harder. I actually have to sort of explain to them that they have to pay more for exactly the same services. That means they have a choice. They can cut back on the amount of time they spend hiring me, or they can pay extra money. Either way, it's not good for them and it's not good for me. I might save a few. I use pens and pencils and computers and things, but I don't buy large equipment. I'll never get back what the HST is costing me in my business. The restaurants I talk to, the realtors I've talked to, other businesses, it's about winners and losers. Some people do win, there's no question. I'm glad for Mr. Downs. I didn't realize he was sponsoring the event tonight, so we've heard his name so many times, but good for him. But so other businesses are losing. And the fact of the matter is, it's not just about small business. This isn't a debate about whether it's good or bad for small business. It's a debate about whether it's good or bad for British Columbians, for voters, for taxpayers, for consumers, not just for business.
Thank you. We have a question here for the against HST. Yes, I'm sorry. Did I? Sorry.
So let Mr. Vanderson answer.
Okay. I don't believe actually Kevin responded.
I passed him out.
Yes. Okay. Please.
Okay, I grow plants. I'm a nurseryman. And incidentally, I have a farmer's card, or I had a farmer's card. So anything that I bought for the nursery to grow plants, whether it was soil, pots, fertilizer, sprays, it didn't matter what, it was tax exempt with my farmer's card. And then I sold to a wholesaler, or wholesalers, and the wholesalers had a PST number. And they gave me the number, which I put on the invoice, and I didn't have to charge them tax. Then the wholesaler sold to a retailer, and the retailer had a PST number, and they gave the PST number to the wholesaler, and they didn't have to pay tax. And then the retailer sold to the consumer paid the tax. The point I'm making here is that now, all along the way, every one of us has to submit a report about the HST we collected, which is why it's costing Ottawa almost twice as much to collect as it did the province of BC. Most of the people that were employed here are now employed in Ottawa or for Ottawa in the collection of the HST, and the BC province pays a percentage, up to 1% of the 7% for the collection. Somebody suggested to me the other day, and I've not been able to verify this or check it out, that it's 99.99% of 7%, but I'm not sure. It's got to be under 1%. But it's definitely much more than what we were paying previously. So the costs have not gone down, the bureaucracy's gone up, and there's more people submitting more papers. The question was, what are you doing? Are you lowering your prices? No. Like the government, I have a lot of holes to fill. Whatever I get or have left over, I'll use to fill the holes. And that's what most, if not all, businesses will end up doing.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take maybe one or two more questions from the audience, and I'll go back to some of the written ones. Okay.
Hi. My question is for Bill Tillman. You had said how a lot of service sectors are having to collect HST. Now, I can sympathize with you that that's an extra burden, but do you really think it's fair that some businesses under PST and GST would not have to pay or collect it, whereas others would?
Well, the fundamental change, I mean, the tax system was developed over a long period of time, but the fundamental change is that services are now being taxed an extra 7%, which is what my business was: accountants, realtors, home appraisal, all those in cleaning, maintenance, renovation. My condo fees have gone up about 4% because most of the condo fee is in fact made up of suddenly HST chargeable services. So all those things are there. They weren't there before. So we're just talking simply about service sector in terms of your question. And yes, it's not fair that all of a sudden there's an additional tax that wasn't there before. So there's no benefit for me and for many of the other businesses. And it's clearly going out of the customer's pockets, ultimately you as a consumer, your pocket.
Thank you.
Did.
No, all right, fair enough. What we're talking about, though, is PST was charged on goods, not services.
Between a hardware store collecting on goods, small business, and a consulting service collecting on consulting firm collecting
it's very
on
simple
services.
because you're not the hardware store isn't being charged the HST on its labor. It's only being charged it was only being charged PST on what it sold, not on the labor it employed.
Response on the other side? Cindy?
Sure, I'm just trying to decipher all that. When businesses provide services to other businesses, yes, there's a HST charge of 12%, but when businesses provide business to other small businesses, they get that back as an income tax credit, and they get to claim that on their HST return. It's no different to other expenses that they pay for.
Okay, thank you. Then I think we still have one or two questions here. Yes? Sir?
This is to one of the bills. I'm a senior citizen, and I'm gratified that businesses are giving their employees more money. But how is that helping me when I have to pay more to have my house painted, more to have my car fixed, and even more to have my income tax done? How's that helping me as a senior citizen?
Well, it's not. It's a simple answer. It's not helping you. And, you know, we've seen all sorts of ways and means of trying to explain how it's going to be better, going to put more money in your pocket, how you're going to save money and all these sort of things. The sad fact is it's only going to come out of your pocket, and the bottom line will still be that bottom line. You can't say it's going to create all these new jobs and save all these businesses money, and it's going to save you money too. Where's the money coming from? It reminds me of the old social credit theorem, the A+B theorem. I mean, where is this funny money coming from?
Okay, response please, the other side.
Yeah, it's a great question. You know,
The government obviously recognized not so long ago that the HST was not very good. The government recognized the HST was not very good. After 2 years, they finally agreed that, yeah, they had to make changes. And they would make changes by promising you a discount, a lower rate 3 years from now. And they would make changes by giving some of you a one-time grant. If you're low income, they'll give you $175 one time, and if you have children under 18, it doesn't matter if you're a multimillionaire or a poor person. For each child, you're going to get $175 one time. You know, if that's good economics, if the economic professors can defend that sort of stuff, there's something wrong with our country.
Can I ask for a response from the other side, please?
thank you. In addressing to the rebates offered to low-income earners, and these are the facts. There was something called the BC low-income climate action tax credit that was offered to low-income earners. That's $105 per person. Per person. Second, there was a HST rebate checks up to $230 per person. So if you have a family of 4, you're going to be getting $920. That exists now, and there has been a lot of talk about that. Third, address really briefly, families with children under 18 will get a $175 check per child. So if you have 2 children, you're going to be getting back $350 rebate check. If you're a low-income senior, you also receive a $175 check. Combine all these different HSTB benefits and credits, we're addressing a 10% HST versus a antiquated 12% PST and GST. Overall, an average BC fan will pay $120 less per year with HST, not with PST. And these are some of the benefits that will help erase the extra tax that you pay in your family. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one last question from the audience. Yes.
Thank you. This question is for Bill Tillman. Bill, you indicated you're a communications consultant and that, or indicated that your services has gone up in price. Now, my understanding of the way that the HST works is that everyone that you bill that tax to gets an HST tax credit, so your actual service hasn't gone up in price, and if you take the embedded argument, your services have actually gone down. So, so your service doesn't cost any more and actually should cost less. Isn't that correct?
No, it's not. Many of my clients are charities or nonprofits or unions which do not get the rebate. If they were all businesses, that might be true, but they're not all businesses. Charities and some registered nonprofits can get partial credits for that, but not the full credit. Even municipalities can only get 75% back of the provincial portion of the HST. So there's a lot of organizations that cannot get it back. But ultimately, someone has to pay it somewhere. I mean, ultimately, whether it's the business, even if it's a business, somebody somewhere is paying the 7%. It doesn't come out of thin air, and I would suggest that most people in the audience are the ones paying it.
Response?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It is really important to understand that when you, as a consultant, sell your services to another business, I understand Mr. Thielman doesn't always sell to other businesses, they get that money back. And so that's really important. But thinking about the service sector versus goods sector, to pick up on a point made earlier, imagine you're trying to design the tax system from scratch. In such a system, what do you want to do? You want to try to have the tax rates as low as possible, and you don't want to be picking favorites across sectors. You don't want the government deciding we like this sector better than that sector. You want to have a level playing field where everyone is treated the same, whether it's a good, whether it's a service, whether it's something in between. That kind of tax system is what we have with the HST. We're going to tax goods and services equally. We're going to have as low a rate as possible. If you're trying to raise the same amount of revenue as you can with a 10% HST, you need a 12% PST GST because you're taxing such a narrow and not as fast-growing part of the economy.
Thank you. We will move on to another question, a written question here, which is directed to the smart tax side. What is job creation track record in provinces with HST implemented in prior years? Do we know what the job creation or track record in provinces with HST implemented in prior years?
Sure. I do have something from BC Stats in front of me here. It says that in every month since the HST was introduced, we have seen employment growth in BC. So that's one thing that we know. So these ideas that there's been tremendous job losses are simply not consistent with the facts. But here's what we know for sure about this, as I know for sure about it as an economist. I'd like to share it with you. When you have a tax system like the HST, you get rid of that tax penalty to investment that you have in the PST system, where people are paying PST at every level of production. You get rid of that. You make an environment where it's easier for firms to invest. When firms invest more, they can buy more trucks, they can buy more equipment. What happens? You can hire more employees, you can pay them more, you have better jobs, you have better job security, and that's how you grow the economy and grow jobs. Thank you for that question. Specifically, I don't have any information for Nova Scotia in front of me. Thanks.
Well, I certainly don't want to compete with a professor of economics, but we can certainly talk about what the unemployment rate, I do have that. I can tell you that we know that the unemployment rate in the Atlantic provinces is not good, that it is good, as I said previously, in provinces without the HST. But if we want to look at the employment rate, again, for April 2011, Newfoundland 13.3, PEI 14.6, Nova Scotia 9.9, New Brunswick 11.5. And we look over across the border, Manitoba 5.4, Saskatchewan 5.6, Alberta 6.1, all the no HST provinces. And of course, BC, as I said, 7.9. It is significant, and it's gone up since July of last year when the HST was implemented.
Thank you. Well, we'll ask you to direct your questions up here, please.
Ontario is 7.9% unemployment.
We have a question in the audience with this young lady here. Please, we'll just wait 1 second. We need you to speak into the microphone because
I was just wondering if you could comment on the previous unemployment rates historically in those provinces, because it's my understanding that they were always higher in those maritime provinces.
No. Certainly they are high, they have been higher, but we've had the HST there for more than 20 years. If it's really a panacea, if it's really solving problems or creating jobs, and certainly there's no evidence of it in the past 20 years since they've run it in.
Sure. So
And you know, the other side keeps
Sorry,
mentioning...
I'm going to ask for one response from each side, please, all right, unless you're specifically asked. So you need to designate a responder. So we'll go to the other side. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the question. It's really important. I mean, my family roots are in the Atlantic provinces, and I can tell you that unfortunately they've had a lot of economic troubles right back to Confederation. And to attribute everything you see in the Atlantic provinces to the HST seems to me a bit simplistic. I mean, you know, Rick Mercer comes from Newfoundland. Was he caused by the HST? I don't think so. You know, these are things that have always been there. And frankly, I wish the HST caused Rick Mercer, because maybe we have a little more levity and lightheartedness in our debates here.
Okay, I'll go to another question here, written one, which I think could be directed to either side, or maybe perhaps over to this side. Why is there HST on new real estate? This now forces purchasers to have to qualify for tens of thousands of dollars more, as well as having to add the tax to amortized mortgage, and then adding thousands of dollars in interest and interest on tax. Why is there HST on new real estate?
Thank you. If you're buying a home that's previously owned, there is no HST. It's exempt, so 0%. For those who are buying a new condo, a townhouse, or a home that's valued at $525,000, there is a federal rebate valued at $26,250. The builders will pass that rebate to the consumer.
Okay, response?
The tax on real estate is a problem, particularly in places like the Kootenays and the Okanagan, where so many people have been dependent, real estate people and builders, on selling to Albertans or people from elsewhere on the prairies. And business is dead, totally. I just came from a tour through there, and we had nothing but complaints. It's hurting. The builders, particularly, the real estate people especially as well, it's disastrous for a lot of those people.
Yeah, please direct your, please no heckling or comments from the audience. Thank you.
Okay, but in answer to that, it's worldwide, you say. It's in Europe, it's worse. I agree.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go on, please.
Thank
you. We're not responding any further to that. Thank you very much. You're welcome to have a sidebar conversation afterwards. But we do have a question in the back here, and as we're closing in on our on 9 o'clock, we'll take two more questions. So the gentleman in the back.
We've heard many, this is a question for the no side. We've heard many times that the HST will create jobs, more so than under the PST. But put another way, it's been said that consumers are really the ones who create jobs by creating demand for products. So I'm wondering why the no side hasn't suggested that the tax be lowered so that consumers have more money to buy more goods, and so that those companies can produce those goods and hire people, and everyone will flourish.
So thank you for the opportunity to stress again that there has been a promise to lower the tax to 10%. And, you know, that's a big difference in what we've seen compared to before. We were talking about 12% versus 12%. Now we're talking 12% versus 10%. And that's really important because a legitimate concern that a lot of people had about the HST was about the question of fairness. And I think that wherever you fell on that side of the debate, whether it was fair or not to businesses and consumers before, when we move that from 12% in the future to 10%, I think that's really going to move the bar. And I hope a lot more people find, as I have, that the HST is a fair tax for British Columbians.
Thank you. Response.
Well, once again, we hear the mythical, imaginary, futuristic 10% HST, which we see everywhere. At the last debate, we had people wearing 10% stickers. There's no 10%. There's no 10% HST. I'm sorry. But your point, though, is a good one. And the problem we have with the HST is that it is a regressive tax. It is a tax which, in fact, it discourages consumption, as you say, sir. It discourages people from spending their money. It discourages them from going to a restaurant and having a meal out. It discourages them from getting their hair cut more often, all of those things. It has to have a negative economic impact on consumers. It is not simply good to stimulate big business in a province where, as Bill Vander Zalm said, we export most of our products. I don't buy a lot of aluminum foil. I don't buy a lot of 2x4s. Elcan, Caminco, Canfor, those are the folks who really profit from this kind of a tax, and they sell their products overseas. And yes, it's good if there are jobs created in BC, et cetera, and the old trickle-down effect, but there's not a single union in this province in any of those industries that supports the HST that's out saying, let's have the HST. Not one union, not the steel workers, not the communication energy paper workers. They don't support this tax.
Thank you. We have, yeah. I think we've got time for 2 more questions, and there was someone down here in the, sort of down here. We haven't had anyone down in the front ask a question, so maybe we could take one down in the front and then one maybe over here. I'm seeing a couple hands go up. Yeah, we've got a couple folks down here on this side. Do you want to put your hand up if you wanted to ask a question? We have a lady down here, right in the second row.
Question for Kevin. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You've spoken about the HST as being a kind of perfect tax, and yet it's riddled, as we are experiencing it, with exemptions, rebates, extra checks, promises. If it's so good, why doesn't it stand on its own? And if it's so good, why not have a provincial value-added tax?
That's a great question, and thank you for it. So, you know, I never said the HST is a perfect tax. There is no such thing as a perfect tax. We're choosing between imperfect alternatives. I think the HST is a great leap forward compared to a 2-tax PST, GST, 12% system. I think it's a great leap forward. So thinking about whether we want a BC or a federal version, you know, this gets back to something that Fight HST team has been arguing about, this sovereignty question. And, you know, we've had tax collection agreements with Ottawa for decades, including when Mr. Vander Zalm was premier. And we have agreements across all different government departments. There's this issue of sovereignty, you know, this happens every single day that a ministry in Victoria calls up a ministry in Ottawa and they make deals. I don't see there's anything different here. I don't see that when Ottawa comes with pockets filled with tax dollars from other provinces and says, we'd like to take those tax dollars raised in Ontario, Alberta, and Quebec and hand them over $1.6 billion to you. Furthermore, we're going to administer this tax for you for free. And furthermore, we're going to allow you all of these choices of what credits you'd like to give and also how to choose the rate in the future. When they come with those big sacks of dollars from other provinces, I'm going to take their call. Other people might make a different choice, but, you know, I think that that's an important thing to consider.
I don't have a degree in economics, but I think repaying 1.6 million, and it's not that, incidentally, it's a lot less. We've only received just about $1 billion. But repaying that amount is a lot cheaper than sending $300 million a year to Ottawa in income taxes from BC they didn't collect before. It doesn't take a degree in economics to figure that out. Secondly, I don't think it takes a degree in economics either to say it's better to pay 1.6 billion now or some much lesser amount, and as opposed to paying 24 billion over the next 10 years from you and I and all of us, the consumers.
Thank you. As we are now running out of time, I see lots of hands going up, but unfortunately we really do need to wrap up at 9 o'clock, so I'm going to turn to our presenters to ask them for some final thoughts, and in reverse order of how we began the evening, I invite the Fight HST to please give us a 1-minute wrap-up. followed by the Smart Tax Alliance. Please.
Well, we've heard a lot of talk about where the money's coming from, who's paying the money, and where the money's going, and who benefits from the money. But bottom line, we can all agree on, you, the consumers, are paying all the money. Regardless of where it goes, it comes out of your pockets. That's number one. Secondly, they've talked about, we know the tax is 12%. They keep talking about 10%. Very misleading. We've seen this throughout the campaign. And in order for you to pay the same amount in HST as you previously paid in PST, they would have to reduce it to 8%, not 10%. So you're still paying more even if there were a break. But you know, taxes always go up, so if they can come down that quickly, they can equally go up that quickly after another election. Keep that in mind. But you know, the important part of all of this too is the politicians went ahead with this, even though 705,000 people signed a petition. 85% of the people were opposed in every poll done. The politicians were ahead. They said, no matter how many signed, we're going to go ahead anyway. I think this is a chance for us to show the politicians, whether they're here now or come later on, that, hey, you're there for the people. It's the people that pay your hefty salaries, provide you the benefits, and give you the big pension at the end of it. And you're answerable to us, the people. We have a chance now, such as we've never seen it anywhere in this country. You can actually tell the politicians what you want. You can practice democracy in a way that you've never been able to do it before. You vote yes to extinguish the HST. It sends a message to the politicians now and for future that they come to the people with major issues like that. They don't simply go ahead. And when the people protest, they have to pay attention.
Thank you.
Folks, you have
We're going to go to the other side, please.
Thank you. Thank you to the moderator, and thank you to all of you who come out tonight on Hockey Night, as I mentioned before. In closing, I really wanted to address, again, the important issue of the HST credits, because, you know, there's really a lot of unanimity among economists about the strength of the HST for jobs growth in the economy. But where there is some differences of opinions is about how fair this tax is. And when I sat down and looked at it, it's really important to look at what we get with the HST tax credit. You get $230 per person, so a family of four gets $920. This is for a low-income family, and that compared to $75 under the old PST credit. This is a vast difference for low-income families. This is really important when we're thinking about things. Now, what we've heard a bit from Fight HST is they're talking about the HST on its own without looking at the tax credit. You can't do that. These things are put together. It's like looking at spaghetti without the meatballs, gin without the tonic, Vancouver without the rain, the Canucks without the cup. HST, HST tax credit, together. Love, marriage, horse, carriage. Can't take them apart. So when we're looking at whether this tax is fair, I encourage you to look carefully at what happens to those who are struggling most in our economy. The HST tax credit protects them. In closing, I'd just like you to consider our choice, what's on the ballot. Mr. Van der Zam has told you about what you want to do with the politicians. We'll have a chance to do that in the election. What we have in front of us is the HST-PST choice. I ask you to vote no to a leaky, creaky, antiquated, complicated, 12% PST-GST, a tax so nice they want to tax you twice system. Vote no to that, please.
Thank you. Well, thanks to all of you for coming out this evening. I hope you have found the evening to be informative, and we encourage you to follow the discussions at www.hstpublicforums.ca, and there you will find links to Facebook and Twitter. Videos of tonight's forum will also be on YouTube. Please remember to watch for your ballots in the mail starting on June 13th, and please, please don't forget to vote in the HST referendum. Thank you all and good night.
Well done, Catherine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.